Hello, this is Kris Nelson from evolvedconsciousness.org. I'll be reading a little article on symbolism and consciousness. This is part 1. There will be part 2, 3, and 4. And there are about 3,000 words, or 2,700 up to 3,000 words each. I split them up into 4 to make them smaller, rather than one big thing that people will find daunting to read or go through. So here we go. Symbolism and Consciousness, Part 1. The primacy of existence to utilize and maximize the power of consciousness is necessary to be understood. First is reality. Second is knowledge from perception of reality. Third are symbols of that knowledge from reality. Fourth are questions about reality from the basics of understanding reality. The meaning and purpose is an extrapolation from the power of abstraction, imagination, induction, intuition, and phantasmal imagery. The beginning of symbolism starts with reality. There is the basic daily sun cycle and the 4 elementals cycle that underlies much of other symbolism. They are symbols referencing processes in reality through observation of reality. Further understanding of reality and ourselves can also be based on symbolism and be described. The 4 elements are the basis for the quaternity and cross symbolism. The 4 points are used instead of the 3-point trinity of consciousness symbolism for processing, generating, and creating into reality. The top 3 parts of the quaternity of 4 elements is essentially the triangle of the trinity of consciousness of thought, emotions, and actions, represented as desires and cares, thoughts, deeds, and actions, which would be fire, air, and water, as the trinity within the quaternity. The quaternity symbolism is also found in quartering, the cross, arms crossed, the crucified one, squaring the circle, etc. As the divine crucified one is resurrected, we can resurrect ourselves as well. Rebirth, renew, recycle, reincarnate, quote, reincarnate into a new version of ourselves in the quartering quaternity elemental process of self-transformation of our desires, cares, and thoughts that result in different deeds and actions, and as a result of different consequences and rewards. And as a result in different consequences and rewards. The sun symbolism, life, sky, air, wings, feather, all symbolize higher consciousness usually, along with many other associated symbols such as the snake. In early cultural engravings, the birds, wings, feathers, such as the vulture and eagle, there's a dual aspect of the light and the dark side, and the air was personified as a great feminine goddess with wings or outstretched arms. So to note that I didn't mention in my recent presentation that I have yet to do the editing and adding the images to, I was talking about the Ka and the upright arms and the action and the deeds and our character, moral essence, spirit, and character, who we are. You can also see that here with the feathers represented through the arms as outstretched arms. A similar symbolism such as the gods Shu, Hu, and He, and Nun, in their roles of upholding and supporting the sun bark or the sky from the earth, etc. So this is a feminine goddess symbolism, and that's where you have the vulture and eagle and owl, those aspects of the dark goddess, not necessarily an evil, but such as Kali Ma and the fury, right eye of Ra, Horus, which is the feminine eye of the sun, and this had to do with it's also the symbolism of fire from heaven raining down as consequences and results, punishment to our deeds that we create ourselves. So there's a negative aspect to the fire symbolism? Well, it's a positive in terms of chaos as a teacher, because it's us bringing it upon ourselves. But that's what Kali Ma, the right eye of Ra, fire from heaven, fireballs. It's symbolism of the wrong way and a correction being applied. Because justice is heat, and that's friction and tension and interference, and that'll cause it's a catalyst for a change and a catalysm. So the catalysm of the fire from heaven, symbolism, etc. So as Gerald Massey calls the genetrix, the symbolism of the great mother bird goddess is associated with space, sky, heaven, void, womb, etc. There is also the dark side to the genetrix, such as Kali Ma, and that's Ma'at, Kali Ma'a, Kali Ma'at. The Ma'at symbolism is there. The dark side related to the vulture, death, left hand reciprocity, and also death to falsity symbolism. Falsity within us and falsity outside, which is why there's the Kali Ma and the dark goddess and the reciprocity in the left hand is because you didn't choose the right hand path, and now you're going to get the left hand smacking you in the face trying to put things right. So there's the death to falsity in you, and there's the death to falsity outside. So the Kali Ma to the evil in you, and the Kali Ma to the evil outside of you. Different aspects of reality are represented through symbols. I just want to go back to the previous paragraph. Kali Ma, to put to death through the sacred goddess within us and outside of us. Ma'at is representative of truth, order, law, balance, justice. So when you put things right within yourself and in the world, that's what you're doing. You're living in the spirit of Ma'at. In truth, justice, order, balance, you're bringing back balance from the disordered imbalance of evil being created. Because balance isn't good and evil. Balance is good only. Then things are back in balance with Ma'at. That's the thing you need to balance with. It's all of us, 7 billion people and more, balancing ourselves with the principle of truth, principle of good, the principle of right, uprightness, straightforwardness. And that represents our moral character, our moral spirit, our moral essence, us, who we are. Either in alignment with Ma'at, in truth, order, law, justice, and balance, or against it. And that's where the imbalance is, when we're creating in falsity, in evil, rather than the good. When you create in the good, it's all one side, it's all one way. That's the balance with that, with Ma'at, with that, quote, force, if you want to look at it as a force, envision it, imagine it, believe in it as a force, as I used to call it in my previous work, which I no longer do. Because again, I was externalizing the powers and abilities and comprehensions that we could have about ourselves, about how we operate as consciousness, and externalizing it as something else that exists somewhere else, which is just, as I see it now, poppycock, bullshit, fantasy, belief. So I'd no longer adhere to such beliefs. So, alright, that's what I had to say. There's Kali Ma, Ma'at, the balance of living in good, so that's why we have to have the dark goddess come in and the sword of truth and the fury eye of Ra and Horus and put down the evil in us, and then we take that battle and we do it outside of us and put down the evil outside of us. So the bull, cow, ox, and horn symbolism also has feather sometimes depictions as sun symbolism. I'm not sure if it was Sumer or Anatolia. Might be Anatolia, Turkey. But there's a lot of bull symbolism with feather symbolism, where the rulers were depicted with horns or with feathers, headdresses. And this all goes back to Egypt. Different aspects of reality are represented through symbols. Anthropomorphizing, personification, and projection all occur to represent concepts in relation to ourselves hence gods and goddesses that share aspects we project onto them. There are masculine and feminine components we define as such, and these components are found in the gods and as well as goddesses, personified in reference to ourselves and the dual nature of gender. Many ancient cultures had animal and nature deification symbolism. To have a quote from the book Foundation of Myth, page 3. Thus, there is growing evidence supporting the idea that early humans showed an early and sophisticated dependence on the sky for information. In fact, Krupp notes that it was inevitable that humans would look to the stars and constellations, for they provided practical services, timekeeping, seasonal marking, calendrics, weather signs, conceptions of supernatural power, and symbolic containment of important cultural data. So the last part, symbolic containment of important cultural data, that's about ourselves, the way we live. So you contain aspects of our lives through symbolism. Also, you develop symbols for supernatural powers and beliefs. Signs of the weather, calendars, basing it on seasonal markers of constellations. When, say in the age of Taurus, when Taurus would come around, I think it was in the spring. I don't know, don't take my word for that. I don't know if the age of Taurus had Taurus in the spring. I think it did, but I don't know. So timekeeping, the stars, the movement of the stars for the 72 years of 1 degree, and the precession, a lot of cultures had this figured out. From fascination with the sky to understanding star positions and movement to projecting meaning and symbols into the stars and planets. First, it seems reality was understood as astronomy, then projection of ourselves onto stars as astrology symbolism. So first was just the movement of the stars, and then we tried to project ourselves onto the constellations and objects we could derive from visually looking at the stars. What's the point of all the symbolism? Just to track stars and their information? Time? To invent or pretend of divine knowledge of origins and purpose in life? Is that what it's for? Just to invent and pretend we have this divine knowledge and oh my God, it comes from God, the belief I have, oh it's divinely inspired, it's the word of God. What about the knowledge of how to live life? Wouldn't that be the overarching purpose of all discovery, in order to relate it to how to live life by understanding life? That is to say, moral life, real life, true life, higher life, eternal life, afterlife, which is the symbolism I've been talking about in the recent presentation that will become forthcoming, and as well as other work I've done on consciousness and causality, part 1. So when you look at that quote on Foundation of Myth, part 3, it says, and symbolic containment of important cultural data, exactly. The overarching purpose of all discovery to relate how to live life. So symbolic containment of important cultural data. Yeah, such as cultural data on how to live. If you know about the Tarot, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, alchemy, astrology, etc., it's all actually about psychology and consciousness. All the sacred wisdom is part of these traditions. Do you think they have knowledge of hidden technology, aliens, or supernatural powers? No, they have real knowledge about ourselves, about how to live life. Until everyone learns how to live life right, then we won't be getting anywhere properly, really. We're always somewhere, but it's not where we want to be, ever. Thousands and years. Things are better, but some other things are worse. Some things are better overtly, but then covertly, behind the scenes, what most people aren't aware of, well, things aren't really better. Things are worse in some cases. It's just overtly, visually, things have the appearance of being better, which is how evil is propagated, and I suppose why These systems were developed in order to sustain the propagation of evil, because when you have people in comfort and the visual aesthetics and the pleasure trap, and they're focusing on the appearances and their feelings of what they receive from their way of living, then if your particular zone, geographical zone of comfort is higher than others, then you're going to be quite satisfied with your level of comfort and your way of living, which is how we operate in the Western world. We're not looking at the esoteric, covert, underlying aspects of life and seeing how corrupted and polluted and degenerate they are. So honestly, what is the point of all this information about truth, justice, and rightness if it's only about getting into the afterlife and it's only presented for the purpose of the afterlife, as many people espouse for the Egyptian religion, and there was all a focus on this, and that was the main purpose. I've recently talked about it in my upcoming presentation that I have yet to finish, editing and adding the images to, about how all these beliefs and this focus on somewhere else later after you're dead is in order to manipulate you and to get you to conform to the central authority and do as they dictate and perform the rituals they require, because you believe that is what's required to get into the afterlife, because that's the belief they fed to you and you bought into it. So rather than looking at truth, justice, and rightness and ma'at, and to get into the afterlife after you're dead, somewhere in imagined existence and land of the reeds, it makes more sense if we could understand the symbolism in ways that relate to our lives right now, and not about imagined beliefs and possibilities that might be actualities. Understanding of exoteric and esoteric knowledge, the growing of information over time, along with the other religious doctrines being based in mythology, metaphor, allegory, analogy, and symbolism, it makes more logical sense to take the symbolism in terms of the importance of here and now and dealing with our current condition, rather than focus on escapism of what happens after the fear of the unknown, which is death. Here is an example of how we externally reference our internal capacities through symbolism. I've previously talked about this, these notes I've had in the previous presentation on words, reality, and proportions, where I had this note and I briefly went through it to explain the power of symbolism, correspondence, analogy, and our consciousness. So here I'll do it in a more constructed way for this article, and it'll be out in Word format rather than just an audio for that presentation. So we have associations through symbolism. So consciousness to the internal, to mind, idea, and ideal. Idea to ideal is a potential. The potential is, quote, spirit, and that's internal consciousness. Internal consciousness is the imaginal realm, where we form ideas, where we form ideals, which are potentials. And this is a causal and creative capacity. Subjective reality is the multiverse, where we're parallel processing to objective reality of the universe. So I've talked about this before in axioms, existence, consciousness, and identity, and another one I think on, or it might also be words, reality, and proportions. Another one before that, I forget. Parallel processing to objective reality of the universe. There's one universe, but the multiverse, we can create any amount of universes we want anytime we imagine something. It doesn't have to be something that exists. We can envision anything in our causal, creative, imaginal realm. So there's causal, and it's internal, and that's spiritual, and that's God, right? The spiritual, God is spiritual. It's all unseen, immaterial, non-physical. That's what spiritual is. That's what God is too. Internal consciousness is the imaginal and creative, and that's the causal realm of generation. So consciousness imaginal, ideal, potential, idea. Causal realm of generation. That's God, the God generator and creator. That's what internal consciousness is, the God generator and creator from the causal realm of consciousness, where we have imaginal realm, where we invent ideas to think of ideals, ideal ways of being, and these are potential ways of being. And these are causal factors and creative that we can act upon and actualize in our lives if we so choose to. So the internal causal, the quote spiritual potential, is the God good potential, the God good ideal that we envision. It all comes from our minds. The ideal comes from us. Consciousness, the imaginal realm, internal consciousness. And that's the potential. The potential that we can envision to become, that comes from our consciousness as well. And this is created into an actual from the potential creative causal realm through the apotheosis of self-transformation, becoming the higher self, quote, higher self. This is becoming a God. Becoming God. This is what apotheosis is. The self-transformation of becoming God. When you realize this power you have, and you engage in the inner work, the spiritual work, the self-transformative work, and you let go of the old to create the new, and you let go of the old world and create in the new world, let go of your old false self and become a new, truer self. So this says the Christ consciousness, God, good consciousness is, quote, spiritual, moral, internal self-consciousness. Self-knowledge is moral knowledge, is spiritual knowledge, is God knowledge, is Christ knowledge. It's all symbolism. Symbols, symbols, symbols. Learn the power of symbols. Know thyself and know the universe and the gods, right? Isn't that what it says on the oracle at Delphi? Does it make sense now how you can know the universe and the gods, at least the God part? And also the universe in terms of the multiverse, the subjective reality. There's the objective reality of the universe, and the subjective reality is the multiverse. So you can know the universe and the gods. Yeah, not literally the whole universe outside of us, and every single planet, and all the life on every planet and everything. No, you know the universe in terms of the power you have as a creator, as a God creator, and to create universes within your own consciousness. Because God, as a first cause, first source, prime mover, unmovable mover, concept, cannot be known. It's unknowable. We just project, personify, and anthropomorphize ourselves onto the concept we derive. So know thyself, consciousness, how it works as a creator, generator of our experience and co-creation of aspects of reality we can alter and live in. An artificial created human world is to know God itself, right? We are the creators, we are the generators, all from within consciousness, the internal, unseen, immaterial, causal realm of consciousness that then manifests actions through the external consciousness as the body mechanisms to act in the world. This is how we are, quote, God, when you understand the power of metaphor and symbolism. We as consciousness, self, soul, are internal and act in the external. So we are, as consciousness, unseen, immaterial, non-physical, but we act in the physical, in the seen, in the material. People think that if something comes from the conceptual realm, with the conceptual aura of, quote, spirit as the, quote, unseen, quote, immaterial, quote, non-physical, and doesn't reflect objects in reality directly, then it's, quote, spiritual knowledge because it deals with unseen things that are not directly contained in the world. People can view themselves as granted access to some divinely inspired knowledge, as if they are connected to, quote, God, receiving the nous noesis gnosis of pure knowledge. The fantasy imagination is turned into reality, unreality into reality, with the aura of, quote, spirituality or, quote, divinity being self-induced. It's all self-induced, this aura of being connected to the universe and God. It's all from the feel-good state of the information being presented to you, or the information that you've derived yourself through the imagination power of consciousness, and how it makes you feel about understanding yourself, your sense of self, your sense of reality, removing of insecurities, of doubts, of discomfort, the alleviation of the fear of the unknown, providing an answer to a question. All these things can provide a, quote, resonance and a feeling, a feel-good feeling, where you feel like you're connected to the universe, you're resonating to the universe, you're resonating with God. These are all self-induced beliefs about how, quote, spiritual or, quote, divine we are in that moment, or because we've found this information. Oh, look at how special I am. Well, you're more special than other people who don't have it, sure. It's not like you're some super divine, noesis, pure knowledge grasping person who's got a direct connection to the information field, to the Akashic record or whatever, and other people aren't as special. No, you're just special if you found an aspect of truth. Yeah, it's special because you found an aspect of truth and other people don't. So then you got to share what you found with other people. But we're all the same. We're all the same people. We're all humans. We all have consciousness. I'm me doing what I do, and other people do what they do. And if we all work together in truth, well, maybe we could accomplish a lot more. And sacrifice our personal desires and attachments to ourselves and other people in order to really get onto the same moral page, finally, for once in human history. But that probably won't happen because people really don't care about morality as true spirituality. People are focused on all this bullshit about the nous, noesis, gnosis, and the pure knowledge, and intuition. I've been through it with living with New Agers. I've encountered it even more on Facebook. It's allowed me to understand even more about false paths that I had been influenced into taking by the influence of others, directly in life, and other words people have said, and in books and videos and audios. Everything can influence us. So what I do is just one thing, and other people can do what I do. You know stuff that I probably don't know, so put it out, but make it grounded in reality. Make it actually important. You want to talk about soul, and you want to talk about reincarnation, and the karmic debt of your past life and this shit. I don't give a crap about any of that. I don't give a crap about aliens and hidden technology and free energy. I really don't care about any of that right now. Oh, sure, that stuff's important if it's true, and let's meet some aliens, let's get some free energy, let's get some super tech, and awesome, great. But I'm not attached to those things. I'm attached to truth and morality. That's what I want to bring about. And then when we get that right, the basics of living, then we can focus on these new things. When we fix the old problems, when we fix ourselves as corrupted people living as false selves, when we fix that by seeking and attaching ourselves to truth and morality, well, then we can focus after we get humanity right. Then we can get the energy thing right. Then we can get the technology right. But everyone wants to focus on, free energy, technology, the aliens, entity this and reptiles that, and astral and remote view, and all these fanciful things that have nothing to do with morality and living proper life. So let's get the basics first, and then let's go into discovering all these other magical, quote, magical and superior aspects of our reality, things that we're not able to demonstrate and prove yet. Aliens and hidden tech and free energy. Once we get on the moral page of understanding, then we can actually create these things for the benefit of everyone on the planet. Because right now, for a long time, Tesla, everybody, it's all been used against us. Everything that gets created and invented gets used against us. We think they get used for our benefit. That's because that's when you live in the rosy-colored glasses. Positivity mask, optimism bias, where everything's good and right with the world and no conspiracies, everything's good. All the technology is for our benefit, and everything that's sold in the grocery stores is good for us, because you have blind trust in the system, blind trust in the government, blind trust in corporations, blind trust in other people, just blind trust everywhere, and that all that does is just make you a blind trusting fool, a fool of life. So let's get away from being a fool in all these beliefs, and let's get grounded in reality. Let's put out work on truth and morality. What's true, good, and right as ways of living. Then when we get to that level of living, then let's focus on all these other things. Let's focus on what's most important, the capital of life, the real capital, truth and morality. I'll continue with this paragraph. So the fantasy imagination is turned into reality, unreality into reality, with the aura of, quote, spirituality or, quote, divinity being self-induced. So it's all self-induced by us. We believe, oh, it's divine knowledge. Oh, it's spiritual knowledge. It's unseen and immaterial. It's real now, because I decide it's real, even though it's not existing in reality. I'm going to make it real. Just like I mentioned in the new presentation to be completed on reality and consciousness symbolism, Bertrand Russell in his paradox that he fought for years and was so convinced that he could prove it right, and in the end he gave up because it was a fool's errand. That's what happens when you're a fool. You go down the wrong path. So you gotta figure out what really can be demonstrated in reality, and if you want to try to prove something, go ahead, but don't get fixated on it being an absolute truth and that it can be proven someday. And then you waste years and years of your life believing in something or trying to prove it like Bertrand Russell did. Anyways, so boom, magic spells cast on the mind, often self-cast, self-delusion. We are our own worst enemies, seriously. We fool ourselves all too willingly. The power of belief. Twist words around and twist concepts, and you can create beliefs that people want to believe in. And look back at history and religion. That's what all they've done. People want to believe these things. So all you have to do is speak it. Speak your influence into existence, your vibration of voice. It will be received by others, and they will lap it up, gobble it up, because why? Because they want to believe in these things, because of how good they make them feel, because of the sense of self and sense of reality constructs it provides in answering questions, alleviating doubt, insecurities, and discomfort, etc. Ideas lead to action through the creation of new things. The creative causal internal realm of consciousness, the soul, the quote spirit, is the creator, the quote God. We are as consciousness creators. Quantum mechanics is unseen, so people associate it with quote spirit and all a bunch of fantastic imaginary beliefs and concepts about consciousness as well. This all results from a lack of understanding the power of imagination and of symbolic correspondence. So when you don't understand the abstraction engine, imagination factory, and the power of symbolic correspondence and analogy and metaphor, parables, allegory, and referencing ourselves through objects in reality, symbols in reality, then you're not going to really understand how this lack of understanding of ourselves and how we've personified, projected, and anthropomorphized ourselves onto concepts such as God. The quote higher self is the potential to actualize the potential ideal we envision in our, quote, spirit, internal consciousness realm. It is higher because we are living as lower consciousness beings compared to the higher state we can become. It's not about, oh, it's higher, it's somewhere in a higher dimension, some being somewhere else, and it's got its own identity and personality, and that's the soul, belief, fantasy. No, that's not what it's about. It's based on where you are now and where you can go as a potential, where you are now and where you can go as an ideal. The ideal is better than what currently is. So the ideal is an imagined potential. So when you're talking about the higher self, it's all from your consciousness as an ideal higher potential of who you currently are. And that's the whole point of alchemy and self-renewal, self-transformation, continually renewing ourselves, continually changing ourselves. We have that ability as higher order consciousness beings to change who we are, our moral essence, spirit, and character. That's the power and strength of Ka, our arms, our hands, our deeds, our actions, what we do in life. That's the ultimate reflection of how we change ourselves, is what we do. So we can better ourselves, and every betterment is reaching a, quote, higher self, because we use a, quote, higher will derived from, quote, higher care and desire. So when you have higher care and desire for truth and morality, then you actualize your will in that truth and morality, then the self that you are becomes a higher self in alignment with truth and morality. It's not a higher self somewhere else, a higher will somewhere else, God's will, the will of creation, all these conceptions that I used to have before where I was externalizing the power we have as consciousness beings. It was all projection and externalization that I was engaging in, because that's the way I was influenced by other conceptions that I had accepted, and I propagated them as such. But when I actually understood the power of consciousness more in symbolisms, I was able to dismantle the belief aspects of the conceptual model framework that I had derived, and I've reformulated it in a more grounded way in relation to ourselves and reality, as opposed to beliefs and externalization of powers somewhere else imagined from consciousness. So we can better ourselves, and every betterment is reaching a higher self because we are using a higher will derived from higher care or desire that aspires to the potential of the air, sky, and heaven symbolism, which is higher, above the lower conditioning into physical worldly attachments. It is to alter our base pleasure carnal way of living through the higher realm of the air element as higher order thinking, leading to higher order doing. It is a metaphor, as are the four elemental fundamentals, for understanding how to generate in reality, how we can better generate ourselves to generate into reality. It's about transforming ourselves, self-transformation, renewal, evolution, change, growth, healing. Better generate ourselves so that we can generate into reality at that level of generation that we've made ourselves to be. So the more good we become, the more of a truer, realer, higher self we become, the less of a lower, falser self we are, and then the more we can reflect that change of who we are externally through our actions in the world. In Michael Tsarion's Post-Human World, he says the higher self is more in the body than in some phantasmagoric belief that it is out there somewhere. This is accurate. Take my new concept about this and compare it to my old one, and one is more grounded in reality, based on ourselves as individual beings capable of becoming the higher self, as just a better version of ourselves that we envision as ideal potentials through our spiritual internal realm of consciousness, the unseen, immaterial, non-physical realm of multiverse subjective reality that parallel processes alongside objective reality. So it's better versions of ourselves that we envision as ideal potentials. And if you look back at other work I've done on the Philosopher's Stone, Spectrum of Living, and the previous one, Natural Law Boundary Conditions, I had all this externalized as outside forces, but The symbolism of God, the spirit, the unseen as opposite of matter, as where we strive towards from where we are, as the actual in matter towards where the potential we strive towards as the quote spiritual, as the ideal, as the way things ought to be in truth, morality, right and good. It's all symbolism. Whereas before I was externalizing it, now I understand it. It's all internal. It's all us that created it. It's all us that has this capacity that we then externalized through anthropomorphizing, personification, and projection of ourselves onto concepts and symbols and put it out there somewhere as a force out there, and it wasn't from us. But it's just an attempt to understand why, where, how, who we are, how we got here, the source, the cause. Then we get to the first cause, and then that's the source of everything, and then we project onto that concept. The quote, spirit is consciousness itself. The higher self is who we become if we want. The higher self is the potential, which is the ideal, from the ideas we envision and imagine in our spiritual domain of consciousness, internally, unseen. It all comes from us, here and now, in the physical reality though. It is all from our body, as the self. If you do not have a body, you do not have a self, soul, consciousness. You do not exist. Period. When you die, gone, period. You're gone. You're not in, the body has stopped functioning. There's no more consciousness, no more self, no more soul. You're gone. People don't like to hear this. People want to believe in an afterlife, and immortality, and eternal life, and the land of the reeds, and the heaven, and the paradise, and Elysium. All these wonderful, fanciful imaginations and beliefs taken as literal realities and on another plane of existence and some other poppycock imagined, invented belief. It feels good, that's why people want it to be true. I've even expressed my understanding of how we are generated as an ego personality identity construct based on where we're born, our influences from our environment that structure who we are to become, and if we were all born at the same place at the same time and have the same environmental factors, like say if you ran a simulation and you put a different body, well then you'd have a little bit of differences. But if you put the same person and you say, well that's me, but the person you are when you're born and you go through life, through your environment, you would become the same person. Because you're born at the same time in the same place and the same environmental factors, everything is exactly the same. So you could only do that in a simulation where you'd run it over and over and over and it'd be the same result every time. Now when you have people born in different places and different times, since no two objects can occupy the same space at the same time, you have twins. They're born at the same place but not at the same time. They don't occupy the same space and position in time throughout their lives. They're always in two different places throughout their whole lives, from birth to death, the twins. They will all have two different perspectives, two different ways of perceiving, because you're not in one body. The two of them aren't in one body, in one time, experiencing the same exact thing. As soon as you have a different body, you'll have a different ego personality identity construct. So if we could all be the same if we were all born at the same time in the same place and had the same environmental factors, which would create who we are to become as an individual soul self-consciousness. So as I was saying, I've told this to an atheist, agnostic before, who doesn't have any spiritual conceptions, quite left brain but intelligent, and they didn't like my model of how we are created in reality, and they saw it as you know, bleak, and oh well, there's nothing after life. And I was like, yeah, that's it. It's this is your life. Make the most of it. You know, they saw that as bleak. But even for them, it wasn't a happy concept, and you know, it wasn't joyful because of all the you're not going to go live in heaven, and you're not going to have an eternal life. And where's my 70 virgins? You know, and all these promises. Where's the golden gates, and where are my wings, and how come I can't live for eternity? So, anyways, all jokingly, but this is just how I have previously envisioned things, and I have yet to talk about it in a formulated way. It's just this is how I understand how our ego personality identity constructs are constructed, and I had previously externalized the force, the vital essence, which still could be true. I have somewhat of a belief in that, but I don't talk about it because it's unverifiable. Similar to panpsychism, the vital essence, or I don't know much about certain conceptual frameworks like panpsychism, but I looked into panpsychism, and then I looked into Stoic physics and emergentism and a bunch of other things, and my conception is parts of all of these things but melded into one, as a possibility anyways, in my conception. So a vital essence and elan vital, yeah, it's possible, but it's not the soul, it's just the spark of that all one, which emerges as a result of the complexity of our biological unit, which allows the expressibility and the emergence of consciousness. Now, lower biological units have lower expressions of lower consciousness, other animals. And then you have plants, which are biological, they're not organic in terms of the etymology of organs. Organic is from organs, only animals have that. Plants don't have it. So they could have a vital spark essence that allows an emergence of movement and basic some type of sensory responsive input response to the environment. It's definitely not consciousness like animals and humans have, and human animals and other animals have. But it could be a vital spark from the consciousness of all one that emerges as a minute aspects of movement. And then you have more emergence where you actually have consciousness expressions as thoughts, emotions, and actions through the animal kingdom. But prior to that, the plant kingdom doesn't have it. It only has basics of input, response, stimulus, response, input, output. Maybe a collective consciousness thing, as I've theorized in other work. And prior to that, you only have matter, which is the lowest complexity compared to biological or organic, and there's no consciousness manifestations from it. A rock doesn't have thoughts, emotions, or actions. Anyways, that's just a side topic on the concept of, on my beliefs on possibilities of other people's conceptions and frameworks. So panpsychism, Stoic physics, emergentism, a few other ones. I see validity of certain concepts, but not of the whole frameworks themselves. They're not completely valid, and I just take bits and pieces of whatever makes the most sense and that I can ground in reality. And a lot of it is belief, like I said. So I got onto this by saying that you can't have self-soul consciousness without a body. So you want to conceive of, the prime cause, the first cause, that's consciousness, the source consciousness, and then more levels of consciousness emerge as more complexity through matter emerges. So basic level matter, non-living, no consciousness. Then you have the first level of living, some complexity, has stimulus response, has growth, but doesn't express consciousness really. It only expresses action. There's no thoughts, emotions. There's only movement through growth. It's not an independent action. It's only growth. Our bodies grow, but it's not an independent action. It's all biological programming. It's automated. And that's what plants are. It's biological programming. They're just growing. That's all they're doing. We grow. We have a set, fixed limitation in growth. We don't just grow until we're 100 feet tall. Plants can grow and grow and grow and grow and just occupy more space. We don't have that. Animals have a limitation in growth. And their actions, their consciousness, comes up on top of the biological processing growth factors of existence as a living thing. And that's where the organics and organs is a greater complexity, where you have consciousness emerging as thoughts, emotions, and actions. And you actually live in reality. Plants aren't living, they're just growing. They're not doing things, they're not living in the world like animals do. They're alive, but it's, look at my etymological thing, presentation, breakdown on living, existence, emotion, feeling, choice. That one goes all into how, even a rock could be considered to be have life, be living, but that's not what it means. But in etymology, in the root word, you can take it as that. So when you're talking about how we understand life and living, yes, the plant is alive, but it's not alive and living a life like other animals do. Plants are not animals. Anyways, enough about that. That's like a 10-minute or whatever tangent that I guess I shouldn't have gotten into. I just wanted to elaborate on the importance of primacy of existence for the power of consciousness, and you don't have a consciousness, self, or body in this existence as you, unless you have a body. Your body gone? Your body never was? Well, then you, your soul self-consciousness, never was, and if it's gone when it was, well, when it's gone and can't support life, well then guess what? You're gone too. Soul self-consciousness is gone as well. Get over your fear. Think a lot. Let go of beliefs. Learn about feel-good attachments, about the pleasure trap, about attachment in psychology. Then you can let go of the need for these beliefs to be true. Our existence as body and consciousness are linked and inseparable. The distinction with consciousness and mind/heart is made to validate the belief in concepts of consciousness pervading beyond current life of the body into somewhere else, afterlife or death. But mind/heart are only the internal, unseen, spiritual aspects to our body in metaphor, while the actions are external in our body. The metaphors play tricks on people as the metaphor loses its symbolism and becomes literal over time, and the consciousness is seen as literally some disembodied spirit or soul, while the mind is not. Because again, the heart, a physical organ, and they look at the head and the brain as a physical thing. So then when they associate consciousness and an awareness, pure awareness, such as you can understand in meditation or DMT experience, then you externalize it, and then it exists outside of us because you're having this experience, not in the physical observable reality. You're having a subjective multiverse experience, self-induced by yourself or by a substance. And then these experiences from your subjective reality, then you're going to take them and try to apply them in reality, and then consciousness as the spirit soul, and then it's not the mind because the mind is the brain, and then the heart is the heart organ, and there's all this literal externalized interpretations when it's all symbolic of aspects of consciousness. These are spiritual conceptions people invent and imagine. The emotions are also metaphorically linked to, quote, spirit, and this is taken literally by some as the real spirit, our emotions, and we need to follow the emotions and feelings in life, because these are the, quote, spirit connection. So, as I've mentioned, I've lived with a New Ager, and it was all about feeling and following your feelings and your intuition, and thought and logic, well, that's flawed, and language is flawed, and completely right brain and balanced fool who just did not know how to discern reality properly and just believed in everything. They were just following their resonance and their emotions. So people follow bliss, follow experience, enjoyment, pleasure, feel good, resonance, etc. as blind, ignorant fools wandering in darkness without being able to see it. They don't see how they're wandering in darkness. They think they're in the light. It's all, oh, love and light and oh, I'm so connected to God. Look at these concepts. I'm so connected. Look at what I believe. But they have no clue they're wandering in darkness. It's false light. We invoke our own experience in the subjective multiverse of phantasms and imagination, similarly to how spiritual, psychedelic, or meditative experiences occur, with intent, desire, wish, purpose, predetermination projected into the subjective realm reality multiverse. We mind mangle ourselves. We have been for millennia, because symbols and metaphors get twisted into literal aspects of reality here or elsewhere. And so you have the dark occultists, priests, and sorcerer manipulators of imagery magic who use concepts to fool us into believing things. This is how rituals and ceremonies were developed as ways to ensure your good passage into the belief of the afterlife, rebirth, reincarnation, whatever else, etc. This can all be seen in the history of conceptual development of Buddhism and Hinduism, for instance. The concept of spirit and God is created in the imagination factory abstraction engine of higher order consciousness that humans possess. We attribute symbols to concepts of the unseen and immaterial we envision. We anthropomorphize, personify, project ourselves onto symbols as a comparative reference for understanding concepts in relation to existence in reality, which we are. We are existence in reality. Do you know why it is called a spiritual journey on the path and way towards greater truth and morality? Because spirituality's goal is morality. It is a knowledge quest, a journey into knowledge, and this requires the spiritual internal realm of consciousness to discover metaphysical, hidden, behind physical aspects of reality through the mental, spiritual inner vision of consciousness. Morality is not something you can touch, and neither is truth. They are conceptual. Conscious awareness of reality is required to continue on the path and way towards the wisdom of right action. No subjective fantasy realities or induced states of altered consciousness are required. Other realities or planes of existence are not required to be known. Here and now is what matters in the matter of reality. And that's how you get to the spiritual, is from the matter that matters. It's how you get to the potential from the actual. It's how you get to the ideal from the actual. That's the primacy of existence for the power of consciousness, the power of spirit, the power of the idea, the power of the ideal, the power of the potential, the power of a generator, the power of a creator, the power of God. I hope this is becoming more and more clear. The aspect of symbolism and correspondence and analogy. Just because it exists in you does not mean you can blindly externalize through the law of correspondence blindly and falsely, and false analogy, false correspondence, and project, anthropomorphize, and personify yourself onto a concept outside of you. You can do that about anything, but it doesn't make it true. Looking at the word fantasy and phantasms of the imagination, they are the same. Everything we imagine is not an automatic objective reality. We often produce unreality from the fantasy of the imagination factory of consciousness. Please note the importance of light in the root of the words fantasy and phantasm. So fantasia, for fantasy, comes from fantasia, which is imagination, phantazo, to show at the eye or the mind, and from pheno, to show in light, and that's from phos, which is light. And so I have phosphorus, and lucifer is the light bearer, phos is light. So it's phos I was going to try to relate Phos to fantasy. I guess the N, anyways, the S is dropped and then an N is brought in. So I'll just leave it like that. So the note, just take note of the light because we're going to do some wordplay on that after. So, and then phantasm, from Greek phantasma, imagine, phantom, apparition, mere image, unreality, from phantazine, to make visible, display, from phanein, feigning, to bring to light, to make appear, come to light, be seen, appear, explain, expound, inform against, appear to be so, from the root, Proto-Indo-European root allegedly, of ba, bha, to shine. With this, I can now see why so many people have an infatuation with the concept of imagination, the right brain or collective unconscious or whatever, being the superior and divine aspect of consciousness. Now I mention this because in my recent past months, going through some of Michael Tsarion's work that I hadn't gone through, he puts a lot of emphasis on artists, and Thomas Sheridan does the same thing. An overemphasis. They're love bombed, they're stricken, they're infatuated with artists. And this is where Michael Tsarion also views some divinity. Oh, the divine, the right brain is the divine, it's the imagination. He associates directly through Carl Jung's work the collective unconscious to the imagination, to the right brain, and to the divine. And that's why he views artists as more divine, because they're tapping into that imagination, which is the collective unconscious of everything, and the right brain, and that's the divine knowledge. Well, you can believe that if you want. I don't. But I'm showing you why I now understand people have an infatuation with this concept of imagination, the right brain, and the collective unconscious as being superior in the divine aspect of consciousness. So it ties into what I am talking about with regards to the symbolism of consciousness, internal, mind, idea, ideal, potential, spirit, causal realm of generation, God, generator, creator, etc. God, light, let there be light, make appear, etc. Are you seeing the references? In the book of Genesis, the first word that God said was, let there be light. Because he was moving as the sun god, which light produces heat in the air. This is part of my new presentation that I haven't released yet, that I have to add the infographics and make into a presentation. But the sun, the light, the heat, heats up the air, creates movements and pressures. The heat, the air, is the breath of life. The breath of life is God. That's the spirit moving upon the waters. And when you move the air, currents moving upon the calm waters, well, that creates a friction and an interference. It creates waves and motion in the waters of above and the waters below. And let there be light. And in the book of Matthew, I forget which one of the 4 books of the Gospels, there's logos. Instead of light, there's logos. But in Egyptian symbolism, you have the air associated to, as Shu, associated to the word as Hu, and eternity as He, and also they have the aspects of light and the story and the creation myth narrative of Shu and the light of the generator of the first light as well. It's all tied together in symbolism. If you understand the source of most of the symbolism we have, as much of it comes from reality and direct observance that anyone can derive, but when it starts off in a certain area and gets developed and then gets shared over time, you can trace back the roots, and I've been able to trace it back to Egypt. And I posit my belief in a prior civilization, a pre-Ice Age, pre-flood, which had more aspects of wisdom and knowledge, which then got transposed over time through survival and then new peoples resettled the Egyptian area, and they had knowledge from the past age, which they've reformulated in their own symbolism. And then eventually the alphabet gets developed from Egyptian hieroglyphs, and then we end up where we are, and our understanding and our beliefs and our symbols and what we know. And a lot of it, most of it comes from, at least post-Ice Age, from Egypt, more so than Sumeria. And the cultures mix, and eventually Egypt adopts the cuneiform text instead of the hieratics that they were using for writing, and then instead of hieroglyphs, which eventually faded out as well. Now hieroglyphs aren't used anymore, and the Egyptian language is gone, and all that's left is Coptic. So things change over time, and it's hard to trace back everything, but you can see a lot of the source symbolism in Egypt. Alright, so we're talking about the infatuation with fantasy and phantasms of the mind, which is imagination, and how that's right brain and the collective unconscious, and it's superior and it's divine, blah blah blah. So God, light, let there be light, make appear, etc. Our subjective multiverse can manifest anything from imagination and create anything and bring it to light, to the light of our mind. Bring to light, make appear, come to light, be seen, appear, explain, expound, inform against. Make visible, display. Yeah, we can do that with anything in our minds. Anything we bring into the light of our minds, that's what happens to it. We shine upon it in the light of the Creator God, our consciousness awareness. So who's shining the light upon these things in our multiverse, the subjective multiverse, our reality internally? Who's the one shining the light upon these objects? Who's the one creating them? Who's the one making them appear? We are, as consciousness. The light of the Creator. Let there be light so that we can see what's being created in our internal subjective reality. That's what we're doing. We're shining the light upon concepts, the light of the Creator, God, our conscious awareness. We're taking our conscious awareness and shining the light. We are the God. I mentioned it in the new presentation as well as the previous one I did. Man was created in the image of God. No, it's the reverse. God was invented and created in the image of man. We anthropomorphized, personified, and projected ourselves onto this concept. We run simulations in our subjective multiverse and give it life, like a hologram in Star Trek, created from light of imagination, phantasm, fantasy, hence everything I just talked about. So I mentioned Star Trek, we create and give it life in our subjective multiverse, where we create it into light. We let there be light in our universe internally, and we create these things from nothing. The light of imagination, phantasm, and fantasy. Because in Star Trek, it's more explained, well, I think in The Next Generation and also in Voyager, it's explained as they're just light. They're not real things, it's just light tricks, That's what the holograms are. So that's exactly where it's a manipulation of light. Well, that's what we're doing in our minds. We're manipulating light, the power of creation, of our conscious awareness to create in our minds. And then that gets anthropomorphized, personified, and projected as, oh, well, the first cause is God, and that's the pure consciousness, and oh, that's how it created all of reality too. It used light, and it let light, and that's why the sun symbolism, because that's the Creator. So the Creator God, well, it uses light to create everything. It's all understanding of reality and ourselves, and we project that onto concepts and symbols in order to make sense of ourselves in reality and answers of questions relating to who, why, and how we got here, our purpose, meaning, life, etc. So the word simulation is imitation, likeness, or similar. When you use metaphors and analogies, you run simulations of likeness to relate things to each other. These are images in consciousness, imagery, imagination. It is not simply false or pretense in a negative, but it is false and pretense in the sense that it is not the exact same identical thing being compared, like water to water, but it is the image of water in subjective multiverse reality and not real water in objective reality. in modern day use of the word simulation, it is used as a model or mock-up. So that's what we do in our minds. We create models and mock-ups, simulations, a pretense, a mock-up of something in reality. It's not water to water, it's the image of water to real water in objective reality. It's a mock-up, it's a model. So there are positive fantasies that bring us the light of truth to live in our life. First, to envision what is not actual, what is not in reality. So to envision the idea, the ideal, and the potential, and then we can create it. First, to envision what is not actual in order to create it. So I'm not saying fantasies and phantasm and imagination is bad. It's very good and it's very necessary to progress into the future. Because if you cannot imagine things differently than what they are, guess what will continue to be perpetuated into the future? Only things as they are. That's all that will happen if there's no imagination and to envisioning ideas, ideals, and potentials of where we can go that are better than where we are now. If you don't have imagination, you're going nowhere. Nowhere. My point is that imagination, the imagination factor and abstraction engine of the power of consciousness as higher order consciousness animals that we are, this is a double-edged sword. The negative part of the double-edged sword of consciousness is the fantasy of living in illusions and unreality as reality itself. Do you see where the, quote, light talkers in the New Age are living in fantasy of the negative kind? Because they're living in illusions and unreality as reality itself. All the love and light bullshit. They're living in the positivity mask, the optimism bias, and they're not seeing reality as it actually is. They just want to project self-induced states of positivity outward, and they think that that's going to create a positive world. Anything they envision becomes truth itself, because becomes reality, simply because they saw it in their mind's eye of fantasy. In the God's eye, where they shone light upon it. Oh my God, it's divinely inspired now. It's the gnosis of intuition. Ridiculous. So they saw the light of truth, but it was only the light of fantasy within their mind, images in their mind. Yet they self-induce it as nous, noesis, gnosis. I find it funny. Imagination is required, but can be a dangerous, double-edged sword when not being mindful and careful to understand its power, and used improperly in reality. You can cut yourself and hurt yourself and others badly with beliefs, even without even being aware, as opposed to using imagination to cut through the false condition and create a better world in reality based in imagination grounded in reality. So you can use imagination to cut through the bullshit by seeing reality as it currently is and imagining the potential that it should be. You can cut through the bullshit and create what should be the ideal, the potential. Or you can use imagination to create fantasies and sell fantasy, and people buy into fantasy, and it creates a whole fantasy world and beliefs that aren't real, and then other people attach other concepts and controlling paradigms and domination in order to manipulate us and control us further with these beliefs. Once it is verified in reality, in experience, known through objective reality as demonstrable, then it can go from simply being a concept or belief in subjective reality and become a fact in objective reality that other people can also confirm through their own experience of understanding this aspect of reality for ourselves. We need to keep things in the belief of possibilities in our conscious awareness and not get confused and project our subjective unreality into objective reality as soon as we create, imagine, or invent these beliefs, or when we have these beliefs from others influence us and accepted by us. So whether we're inventing these beliefs ourselves or whether these beliefs are being summoned, inducted, induced, and imposed upon us by others through the influence of the power of the vibration of speech or visual input. We got to stop. We got to recognize that the beliefs are possibilities, and not to project these subjective beliefs as objective realities. So that's where all these, I've mentioned it before, and God becomes the absolute, and then reality becomes relative. So where we're living, it's all relative, it's not real, and it's all illusion. But God over there, the thing that we imagine in our consciousness, that's the real thing now. So it's hilarious. Once you understand this, how people take the fantasy and make it reality, and they take reality and they make it fantasy. It's wow. The double-edged sword of consciousness is amazing. How we can create prisons and enslave ourselves, and as I mentioned above, cut ourselves and hurt ourselves, and cut others and hurt others with just belief. So the allegedly divine power is simply our consciousness itself, which is contained within. The way to heal is with an evolution in consciousness, whereby we realize the power of consciousness, which is divine, as a creator and generator, as a god, so to speak. We have anthropomorphized, personified, and projected ourselves onto something else. We have disempowered ourselves by not understanding the power we have. It seems that building a framework and model as a self-referential understanding is very difficult for people to envision, and they require projecting aspects of consciousness as an image of God outside of themselves, whereby they see the power of themselves as existing elsewhere other than within them. So what I mean is, originally symbolism was created as a reflection of ourselves and reality, so that we could express understanding of ourselves and reality. But then this aspect of using reality as a self-referential point, or using ourselves and symbols of reality to refer to ourselves, that seems to be too hard for some people to understand in the power of symbolism and deriving conceptual frameworks. So then what they do is they project all this understanding, the self-referential knowledge that refers back to ourselves through reality, back to ourselves, or ourselves through reality, and how some aspects can be mirrored and corresponded and analogized. That's not seen for what it is, and then we project those interpretations and those symbols, and then we make it literal things outside of ourselves, as opposed to the original symbolism that it was used to convey. It seems many need an externalized object of reference in order to make sense of ourselves, and since we cannot find it in reality of the objects we live in, we are forced to invent other realities and posit explanations from those far-fetched projections outside of ourselves. So, to make sense of yourself and reality, we create symbols to reference ourselves in reality in a sort of a loop. Just like how we generate in reality, we can use analogy and correspondence to refer to ourselves with reality and reality to ourselves, where it's applicable and actually makes sense and can be demonstrated. But this aspect of symbolism, metaphor, allegory, and parable is forgotten or is purposefully omitted, and instead it's taken as a literal. So the symbols are not taken as reflections, symbolic reflections of ourselves, then they're taken as literal aspects of reality or somewhere else in another reality, and then the whole purpose and meaning of the symbols and the knowledge about ourselves, the self-knowledge, in order to create and live morally. Hopefully that's what the knowledge was expressing about ourselves and our consciousness and psychology and how to live properly. Well, then that's externalized as a force somewhere else. So it all becomes somewhere else. The higher self, truer self is somewhere else. It's a force somewhere else. all of our abilities of consciousness. It gets externalized as God itself, as a force somewhere else. And we just keep fooling ourselves over and over. So that's the end of this Symbolism and Consciousness Part 1. As I said, there's Part 2, 3, and 4 to come, so I'm glad I separated them, or else it looks like an hour, 20 minutes for each one. We'd be looking at a 5-hour audio probably if I would try to read them all at the same time. And my new presentation is already 6 hours. I'll be splitting that into parts since it's too big of a chunk for me to upload overnight with my slow connection. And I guess people will be able to see more images in the video format, as opposed to one 6-hour video that people will be like, oh my god, I'm not going to go watch that. Especially since I'm not very well known and people don't have they don't put salience or weight and value in much of my work because they don't know what I'm talking about. So a 6-hour video, not many people would watch that, is my point. So I'm going to break it into smaller parts. Well, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.